It's time to call the meeting to order. We have a roll call.
Okay. Chair West,
Present.
Vice Chair Miller-Jubay,
Present.
Ed Contreras,
Present.
Diane Foster,
Here.
Cameron Fox,
Present.
Taylor Funru is absent, Rich Miller,
I'm here.
Bob Silverford,
Here.
Lori Tingley.
Here.
Okay, great.
All right. So the first step, first item is approval of the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to,
I have a correction.
okay?
I was waiting, I'm like,
I'm ready.
Hey, look at me. Look at me.
All right.
And I may be mistaken, but I don't think I am, that the farewell congratulatory party for Captain Daniel was on November 29th instead of October 29th as stated. Is that correct? And that's all I have. Nice job, Angie.
Okay. I will make that correction.
I actually did it in pen here.
Oh, okay.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as prepared?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Opposed? All right. Let's get my signature. And today is the 19th all day? Or 18th? I want it to be the 19th so bad. Okay. All right. Next thing is our board member announcements where we can share or whatever. And we're going to start with Lori since she's on the end.
Oh. Nothing really of any interest.
Okay. Rich? Okay. Ed?
Just a couple of incidences of vandalism there at the St. Francis Church for the crosses. I think they've been reported.
The ones in the field?
Yeah.
Okay. None, Pam? Okay. Bob?
I have none, Chris.
Nothing.
Diane?
I have just a little bit of a story. So my kids and I were driving through Sherwood yesterday, and we happened to see Officer Kelly, and my kids from the back seat were like, "There's the guy that gave us the stickers today," and that was just yesterday. So they were telling me about how he was at their middle school, and all the kids like ran over to him and high-fived, and he was passing down stickers, and it was cool to see them make that connection, that's kind of the cool guy in town right now. So I thought that was neat.
Nice.
That is neat.
I thought I was the whole town.
You're not the cool
Sure
guy,
do.
Chief. Gotta wait for the squirt gun fights at the square.
Yeah.
to Get it back. All right, and the only thing I wanted to think back to the last 13 months and what PD's gone through with the Christmas Day shooting and what just happened this first month of the year. There's been a lot going on that we've been involved in. Clearly, the department's training and leadership has helped them all come home at night. And that's very important, and our citizens continue to be safe. And I'm looking forward to the rest of 2018 to be, I don't want to say uneventful, but I want to say that we don't have any significant tragedies that we're dealing with. So how's that? All right. So the next item is some new business, and Bob and I were able to attend the city council work session on the 2nd. And there the chief presented, I think it was the first unveiling of the whole concept of using our photo infrastructure that we have at Roy Rogers and Fulton Sherwood and at Sunset and whatever that road is.
99.
99, okay. And using it for speed control. So with that, I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to tonight, Chief.
Thank you. So if you notice on your agenda, this is item 5A under business, and then there's also under staff report 7C, traffic enforcement statistics follow-up. That's something you all requested a couple months ago, I think, and we lost the December meeting, and then, so here we are. It took me some time. But anyway, so this is all going to be combined. That's the point of that. So just so you know. And we actually are going to start with, it's all traffic related, so I'm going to start with the update that you requested for. I think it would have been back in November. So if you want to either look at the TV or you can adjust so you can see the big screen, whatever works for you, we'll go through this. So I'll give you that stats update. We'll talk about, I thought while we're doing this, I'll go ahead and give you a photo red light update, a brief one. I think there's enough folks newer to the board that just may not know the whole story about photo red light. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the speed enforcement, as Chris said. So the data that I'm going to share from you is from the last 4 years. That was kind of the window, as I recall, that you all gave. And we're just really going to talk about the most common citations. So I have pages and pages and pages. Forgive me, I just didn't want to go through there and count everything up and spend all the time. So some of them are fairly random. You just never know what's going to pop up on a traffic stop, and an officer may choose to issue citation for. So I'm just going to focus on what the most common offenses are, and they happen to be probably some of the most important offenses, and certainly the ones that you all are most interested in and have talked about. So here we go, 2014. So we've got 6 offenses there, and as you can see, by far and away, and this you'll quickly see that this is a theme. The offense we cite the most people for is violation of posted speed. Let me back up a second. This does not include photo red light tickets, okay? These numbers will include fail to obey traffic control device, non-photo red light. So when somebody runs the photo red light and gets a ticket through that system, it is for failure to obey a traffic control device. Same statute, but those are separated out because clearly there's way more of those. But these are citations that are issued when an officer pulls somebody over and physically makes a traffic stop and issues citation. So you can see there, you have a copy of the presentation where we were in 2014.
So that's 1,700, that's by 365, that's 60 a day?
1,700.
No,
Where do you see that?
no, I was adding the number of citations.
Oh, you're adding those up.
I-
Okay.
that's
This
not
doesn't
right.
count all of the citations that they gave, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah, this
Okay, never
is
mind.
just the
Just
most
top
common.
ones. Okay.
Right, and so the cutoff there was 86, right? So there's going to be some offense that we gave 54 and 30 and on and on. And 2, I wasn't going to report on all those, we'd be here online. So that's 2014. I'll just pause at each year, and if you have any questions. There are some nuances and some differences, but. So there's 2015. And so we actually went up a little bit on the speeding there, and there were some other changes. And I'll just tell you right now, I have no explanation for any highs or lows in any of this data. I have no idea. There's so many factors that could play into, well, why did speeding go up? Why did mobile device go down? It could have been staffing. It could have been any number of things. So I apologize, I'm not going to be able to provide those kinds of explanations. But that's 2015. Generally the same sets of violations, you'll see there's real commonality year to year. So there's 2016, we're still well over 700 for speeding, several hundred for cell phone. And then we actually see a pretty interesting change in 17, which of course, as I said, I can't explain. So speeding was down significantly. I don't know that there was a change in behavior. Could have been a slow start to the year because of staffing. If you remember right, we got down 3 people on patrol at one point because, or in uniform, because our SRO went to detectives and we had to hire 3 folks to fill those spots. So that could have a significant impact. Most of this is going to fall into the category of self-initiated activity, right? So calls for service are going to get answered, whether you're short or not. Self-initiated activity is the first thing that's going to suffer if you're down bad. So again, don't know that that's it, but that's what the last 4 years have looked like. So any questions about any of that? Yes, sir.
So I do have a question about policing patterns. So let's say, for example, after the shooting on Christmas Day of 2016, those officers are involved or on administrative leave for a period of time, and they are replaced by other agencies, right? The people that come in from Washington County or from Tualatin, they don't.
No.
So you're operating with a leaner police force during that time.
So the first, I'd have to go back and look at the calendar, but the first 2 weeks of 2017, we would have been down, regardless of what staffing is, you were down, and I think we were actually down those positions. So then you add another 3 to that because those officers were on admin leave for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the process. So now you're down 6 people that are out conducting.
So that could have impacted that.
Absolutely could have, yeah, you bet.
Now, a question I do have, though, is if you do have outsiders come in as temporary relief for whatever reason, do you?
At times.
Okay. Do they have the same commitment to writing citations?
No.
Okay.
So if we, for whatever reason, like say we're gonna have a department meeting, and so we request an outside agency to cover the city for 3 hours while we conduct our meeting, which happens. They're operating under their own philosophies and agency cultures and priorities, and so when they come in, we're not gonna tell them, hey, these are the things we want. We're generally telling them, please respond, be here, and respond to any priority calls while we're unavailable. So no, they're not going to be thinking the way we're thinking. Now the other thing to keep in mind is down the road, we're gonna go over our call for service update. That plays into this as well. So self-initiated activity is done when officers aren't responding to calls, aren't writing reports as a result of calls. So it's 2 bar graphs, right? So there are two data sets. So as the demand on their time goes up, their ability to how they spend their free time goes down. So as you'll see when we get into that, 2017 was an extremely busy year for calls for service. That may have played into it as well. These are all, I'm just hypothesizing on what may have caused these number shifts, but.
I kind of found it interesting that 2014 and 2017, they posted the speed 1 to 10, exactly the same. And the 2 years between those, they were not even close to 100.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting how the data comes out. And this is data from our court system, by the way. These aren't our numbers or dispatch numbers. These are citations that court process. So, so 119, 15, 33, 119. Yeah, there you go. So that is interesting. I would say probably the biggest source of those citations would be school zones. 1 to 10 over, somebody's in a school zone speeding, very low threshold to get a citation when you're should be going 20 and you're going 28, you're probably gonna get a ticket for that. Any other questions? So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. I think that the big takeaway for me that I would share for you is when you talk about speeding and you're getting that input from speeding, yeah, absolutely. We're riding, that's by far our biggest complaint. We hear the most complaints, I think, about speeding vehicles. It's clearly our biggest portion of traffic enforcement has to do with speeding, and that wouldn't happen if it wasn't there. Okay, so let's jump into photo red light. Brief history lesson. Conversation started in 2008. We reached out to our vendor, Redflex. They did some surveys for us. They were selected, by the way, they were selected as a vendor based on a piggyback of an existing RFP and contract. So they did some surveys. We identified, we pulled crash data from ODOT. We identified the 2 intersections that we felt were most were probably I'm trying to, all of a sudden I'm not thinking of, the most critical, but where photo enforcement would be the most important based on crash data. So the decisions to choose 99 TS and 99 Sunset were based solely on crash data that was provided by ODOT. We also looked at crash data from Washington County because Washington County tracks all intersections, controlled intersections within the county, and they have a ranking system. I haven't looked at it in several years. I couldn't even tell you if they're doing it still, but those 2 intersections were in the top 10 of potentially most dangerous intersections in Washington County. So that confirmed the data that we were getting from ODOT. We had significant problems, crash problems at those 2 intersections. In particular, 99 at Sunset, because it was a newer intersection. At that time, it wasn't that long before when those lights were put in there. Just was getting busier and busier because of the development. So 2009, we settled with our contract, got the permitting, the installation process started. The installation was completed in 2010, and the system was activated. It was turned on in October, and for the month of October 2010, it issued nothing but warnings. So that was part of our, hey, heads up, pay attention. For 30 days, everybody got warnings. And then on November 1st, it actually started issuing citations. So what I'm going to show you is the first full year's worth of data. So you're not going to see citations for November, December 2010. I'm only going to show you complete years worth of data, but I can tell you that it was shocking, the number of tickets that were issued in November and December. November was, it was literally unbelievable, the number of tickets that were going out. And even more unbelievable, the number of people that were running the red light in total. I'll talk more about that.
Just real quickly, I wrote a note to myself. What is the percentage that Redflex gets in that whole system?
It's not a percentage. We have a lease agreement with them right now. We pay them a monthly lease that was negotiated, and we just pay them that period. So the equipment is all theirs. They maintain it, they update it, they upgrade it, they test it, they provide all the back work, kind of the backdoor systems that give the citations to us. Every violation that's captured is reviewed 3 times by Redflex before it comes to an officer to view. They're making sure that it's a prosecutable offense. You can read the license plate, you can see the face, the person didn't stop halfway through the intersection, there wasn't some other weird thing going on, there wasn't a malfunction in the system. They take care of all that, and so that's the service that, as well as taking care of all the equipment. They do all that for us. So we started out with a per paid citation fee, and it just became too difficult to rectify the numbers back and forth. So we renegotiated, during one of the renegotiations of the contract, we switched to just a flat rate that we pay them. And I don't know, for them, maybe it's based on some kind of magic percentage, I don't know. It's what they said. The city compared it to what we had been paying and felt like it was comparable, and it was, from a bookkeeping perspective, it just made life a whole lot easier for finance. So there we go, full years, 11 through 17. We anticipated an immediate drop, which we saw for the first 2 years. There was also some construction in 2012, 2013, which limited the traffic. But as you can see, we've kind of leveled out now. So for several years, we've been right around 5,500. I think the average there, I didn't do an average, but it'd be pretty close to 5,500 per year. Now, those are citations that are issued. Okay, those aren't people that run the red lights. I'll talk about that in a second. Those are the citations that are issued. So that tells you right there, this is still a problem, in my mind. So over 5,000 people running red lights in Sherwood every year.
In those two intersections.
In those two intersections. So that doesn't count stop signs, that doesn't count the other intersections, that's just those two intersections.
Do you know, do you guys get together and compare and contrast with other cities like Tualatin or Newburgh that are similar in size? And
No.
so there's, okay.
So I couldn't tell you if they have more or less.
And is there any research as to what is the threshold before we add a third or a fourth or a fifth red light flashy thingy?
Try not to use the technical terms. That it would be based on crash data. If we had an intersection that kind of popped up on the radar, we would look at crash data and we would make it analyze it based on that.
So at 15 a day, which is what that 5,500 a year is, how much of your staff time is involved in the department's processing once you get it from the vendor?
It takes about anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes per citation for the officers to approve, depending on the nature of the citation. If it's really clean and easy, like the license plate is good and the photo matches like perfectly the DL, or let me just give you a crazy example. If I was approving a citation, I'd pull it up, I'd watch the video, lights red, I can see the lights red, car goes through it, everything matches, everything looks good. Then I'd pull up the photo of the driver and I'd be like, oh shucks, that's Chris West. And I look at the RO information, I'd say it's Chris West, everyth's good, boom. That's as quick as it can possibly go. The flip side of that would be, I pull up the photo and I'd see somebody that appeared to be a middle-aged, quote-unquote, white male. I'd look at the DL and the driver's license for the registered owner, and it showed somebody to be, 38. And I'd be like, okay, did they look 38? You know what I mean? So then maybe I need to do a little bit more work.
Or it's a teenager that's driving mom and dad's car.
Well, if mom and dad are the RO, it goes right out, because it's clearly an age mismatch. Let's say the first name is Kelly. Well, that can go either way. So there may be circumstances where the officer has to spend a little bit more time on it. So 15 a day, I think we have about 5 or 6 officers that are responsible, that just all work through that. So it can take quite a bit an hour, or quite a bit of time each day. And they may not do it each day. They may, again, these are averages, so Sunday probably doesn't produce that many in the middle of winter because traffic's down. Monday is going to produce more, so there may be ebbs and flows, but it definitely does have a time impact because they have to come in here to do it. Can't do it out in the car.
Does it filter in through like one mailbox sort of a thing?
No, we log into a website, so it's all web-based. They log into the system using their own credentials, and then there's a queue, and they just start working through the queue. The other thing that happens is they may issue one, citation gets mailed, person gets it, can't speak to the person's mental intent, but they'll say, nope, not me. They'll fill out the certificate of innocence, they'll mail it in. That now means that Angie has to touch that, all of those, and it'll go in the pile for what we call renomination. When somebody fills that out, they're not required to tell us who it was that was driving. They're just simply required to send us a copy of their driver's license so that we can verify, oh yeah, it wasn't them. And, now they can dime out who's driving, but they're not required to. Businesses, on the other hand, are required to tell us. They either pay the citation or they tell us who's driving. So then they go in the renomination basket. An officer then has to pick them up, and now that officer is processing that citation a second time. And it's not that uncommon for the officer to pick that up, look at it, and go, "It's the same person." And then we have to reissue the citation back to the same person. We've actually had people then send in a second certificate of innocence. The officer will call them and say, "You're getting a citation," or people come in, "It's not us," and the officer will look, "I think it's you." "Well, it's not me." Then the judge will decide. But you're getting the ticket.
What's the percentage of that turn into renominations?
I bet it's in double digits, but I don't know, not 50. I mean, it could be 10, 15, 20. I have no idea. But I know it's not uncommon, there'll be a stack of them. And the majority of those are true, innocent. I mean, the people, for whatever reason, we missed it. And they send it in and we check, yeah, it doesn't look like it's them. But again, they have to go through, the officer has to touch that citation and do the whole thing all over again. They may go back to the computer and look at pull up the driver's license image electronically, and there's some of these that take a lot of time.
Is it required that a sworn officer deal with those, or is that something that can be handled by an administrative person?
It has to be, the citation has to be issued by somebody who's a peace officer. Now, some agencies use different variants of that. There's retired, or there's special commission folks that do it, but it has to be somebody that's a peace officer that has the legal authority to issue a citation. So for us, that's just our officers, so.
Do you look at it versus the volume of traffic?
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Yeah, good segue.
I actually did have one question.
Yes.
I may have missed this, but I just know, like, being a student, hearing, like, oh, I was driving my parents' car. So, like, the thing, how you said, like, renomination, yeah. So, if it is, like, a kid driving the car, does the citation get waived?
No, unless it's obvious. So,
Or it's, like,
if the RO, the state statute only allows us to issue citation to the registered owner.
Mhm.
And the statute says there's a presumptive, it's a presumptive offense or conclusion that this RO was driving, unless it's clear that it wasn't. So let's say that we'll just use an example. The car's registered to your dad. Okay, so we see that it's the car's registered, and then we can, if we had to, we could pull up the RO's driver's license image if it got that close, but we see that the car is registered to David Fox, right? Born in, 68 or whatever. And we look, and it's you driving, and we're like, well, that's clearly not David Fox. It goes away. I mean, we just automatically dismiss it. It's obviously not the RO, and we cannot issue a citation.
So interesting. I've heard, like, parents say
No,
that
I'm not.
before, but I didn't know if that was, like, true or not. So-
Yeah, so what would happen is, if the statute allowed us to just send the ticket anyway and say, hey, if it's not your driving, then it's your responsibility to come in, right? But the statute's not written that way. Now, there could be close calls, okay, so like a brother. So your uncle's in town visiting, he borrows your dad's car, runs the red light, your dad gets a ticket and goes, in that instance, your dad could get the ticket and go, oh, that's not me, that's my brother.
Yeah.
But
So there's
if it's obvious, it's gonna get tossed out.
Yeah.
So the other thing is don't, for tax purposes, register cars as a business.
Well, I don't know, I mean, there may be more advantages. The real key is don't run red lights.
Oh, yeah.
And register your kids' cars in their own names.
Yeah.
All right,
Good point, chief.
so here's how it breaks down. Those years that I just showed you, by far, our biggest offender is the right turn on 99 North at 12th and Sherwood. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Just a couple things about that. First and foremost, if you're like, well, why do we issue tickets on right turns? Look no further than me. We weighed that and considered it at the time, and I said, we're going to do it. Rationale number one, and by the way, I'd make the same decision tomorrow. Running a red light, to me, is running a red light, okay? If you're not going to come to a stop on a red light before you turn right, I have zero confidence that you're suddenly going to come to a stop going straight or turning left. It's a behavioral thing, it's a mindset, and it's that simple. Number two, the threshold, there's a speed threshold on all of our sensors that if you have to be going 13 miles an hour. So if you come up to make a right turn and you're going 9 miles an hour, you're doing the proverbial California stop, and you go through, it's not going to pick it up because you weren't going fast enough. So everybody that runs a right turn red light is going 13 or higher miles an hour. That now to me becomes dangerous. You're not sneaking through, okay? You're just flat driving through the red light.
Look the other way, I mean.
So that's why we're there, and clearly there's a problem with that. Clearly people are not stopping there. So that's our biggest offender. And then northbound at Sunset, remember this because this is going to come back up.
Chief, on that right turn though, it's happened to me several times where I'm coming to an intersection and somebody comes into the intersection. They start stopping and then you can see the gears going, oh, I can beat him and take off.
Right.
So at that point, if he's slowed down enough to get under that 13 mile an hour.
It's not gonna take a picture. Yeah, I know. We had to set the threshold somewhere. We had to rely on the expertise of our vendors, and they said 13 was generally, we looked at a lot of videos to see, okay, what's 13 look like? What's 8 look like? And it needed to be defensible. Even though I feel very strongly about it, it still needed to be defensible. I have no problem. And early on, believe me, lots of phone calls, lots of in-person visits in the lobby. This is a bunch of garbage. I was turning right. And I said, yeah, and you made a right turn at 15 miles. Let's go sit down and watch the video. Here's your video. You're telling me that's okay. I was turning right. And you went through the red light at 15 miles an hour. We're just not going to agree on this one. So it had to be defensible. That's why we settled on that. And then the next biggest offender are those folks coming into town and they're running the light at sunset. And you can see what those numbers are. So like I said, that's important because we're going to come back to that intersection in a minute. So here's the thing with the system. Out of every 100 people that run a red light, straight, right, left, doesn't matter where, 44 of them are going to get a ticket, 54 are going to get away scot-free. Because there's weather factors, there's bad license plates, there's poor images, there's, you name it, those things that there's gender mismatches, age mismatch, all the things that I've some of which I've explained to you, the tickets get kicked out. So it's far from a perfect system. It's far from indiscriminate, right? I've had people tell me, well, it just indiscriminately gives everybody a ticket. Well, it really doesn't. More people get away than get cited. So again, this is the data that makes me sleep well at night when we're talking about photo red light. I have no problem with the system because imagine what those numbers would look like if you added 50% again on top of it. Right? So now, 5,500 a month, we're looking at 8,000, or a year, we're looking at 8,000 for the low years, so. Who's running our red lights? There you go, it's 70, well, if we round up, 74% are out of towners. 18% are out of staters. Very, very small percentage are folks from Sherwood. The problem is not us. It's not us, okay?
It is when we first moved here.
And then we learn how to go other ways.
Again, that's not the answer. Hey, we're all to stop at the red light. And then here's the other interesting piece of data. So for every one of those years, the loops that are, the sensors that are in the ground allow our vendor to count the total number of vehicles. These numbers might be a little high because I'm not sure whether it's just from one or both intersections. So if those numbers are from both intersections, somebody's going straight, all the way through town is going to trip it twice. But regardless, it's in the millions, and when you compare those numbers to the number of citations we give out, the percentage of people that are getting citation compared to the traffic volume is almost statistically insignificant, right? If you were an analyst and you're looking at figures, you'd look at 0.03 and go, that's just not even, certainly 0.01 is really not even worth mentioning. So the fact of the matter is, it's not indiscriminate. It's, we're on average there, we're talking about 0.2% of all the cars that go through our intersection are going to get a ticket.
What happened in 2013? Why
People
was there
stopped
so?
8 million less cars.
I don't know. Could have been construction, could have, yeah.
2013.
Could have been a recession, people weren't driving as much then because of gas, who knows?
8 million? That's a lot. That's a big discrepancy.
But citation-wise, it wasn't that far off.
Yeah. Okay, any questions about photo red light? Because now we're going to talk about photo speed. Okay. As I said, top traffic complaints right there, off the top of my head, those are what people are talking to us about all the time. Speeding, stop signs, and cell phone usage. There's others. And then traffic volume cutting through neighborhoods is really not anything we can do about it. We work with engineering on that. We do traffic surveys. We try to educate people. By the way, if a constituent comes to you and says, "Hey, you're on the police advisory board. I've got this traffic volume." There has not been a situation once where we've looked at with engineering and done surveys where there's actually been a traffic volume problem. It's always perception. And 9 out of 10 times when they're complaining about speeds in those areas, it's perception, because we do speed surveys. The vast majority of people aren't speeding. So sometimes 25 looks quick. That's just the reality. So I stand at my own house and I'll hear a car and I'll look and I'll be like, oh, that sucker's going too fast. And then when they go by me, I'm like, yeah, that was probably about 25. Sometimes it looks fast. So those are our top complaints. So this is all, the law is known as House Bill 2409. It became law in October. And what it does is amends the existing photo enforcement statutes to include speed as well as stop signs. And you can use new cameras, you can use existing cameras, it allows for either. And you can issue citations for anybody going 11 miles an hour or faster at any time. Green, red, whatever. And you can issue, but you can only issue one or the other, not both, unless they're going faster than 21 miles an hour. So let's look at this table because it explains a little bit better. So all of our posted speeds, we're only talking about those same two intersections. And the posted speeds of both of them are 45 miles an hour. All the way through town, it's 45. So violators going 56, that's 11 over, the light's green. They're not gonna get a red light ticket, but they can get a speeding ticket. They're going between 56 and 65. They can get and the light's red now, okay? So again, they're in that 11 to 20. They can get a red light ticket if they run the red light. Or they can get a speeding citation if they're going that speed, but they can't get both. So the jurisdiction has to choose one or the other.
Which costs more.
I was gonna ask.
They're pretty close. They're pretty close. I'd have to look it up. I think probably red light.
And time-wise for the officers to review, is it about the same time?
Exact same process. It'll be the exact same process. So then you're going 66 or faster and the light's red. Obviously, we've covered if the light's green already, but if the light's red, you can get both. The system can legally issue you a speeding ticket, and at 21 plus over, that's going to be an over $200 ticket, and you can get a red light ticket, which is I think is $265 now. So that's how the law breaks it down.
At what point does reckless driving come in?
Can't do that. I would say at 66 miles an hour running a red light, but the statute doesn't allow you to cite for anything but speeding or violation of red light.
When does this system go live with the updates?
The updates for speed,
Yeah, for the.
we don't know. We don't know because we're in that process right now. So we're in the exploration process. We took all this to council, wanted to take it, Chris was there, Bob was there, wanted to take it to you all. You all then have the opportunity to chew on it and come to council and say, hey, we're all in favor of this. The general feeling we got from council was they're in favor of it. I think there's going to be a resolution ready to go on the 6th. So that would be an opportunity, if you're in favor of it, for Chris or whoever to come and say, by the way, council, we're in favor of this. So. Okay, so before we got to this point, we did some speed surveys. So our vendor went out and put some actual survey things down on the roadways at Sunset and at 12th Sherwood, and took speed surveys for 24 hours, and then compared those to the same speed, results that the sensors in the pavement got, just to make sure that they were correct. And they were correct. So then they took the speeds from the pavement sensors over the course of the entire year. Okay, so these speeds were taken all from, I think, do you remember 2016 is what I wanted to say. Okay, so these are 2016 numbers. So 99 north at Sunset. Remember I said we're going to come back to this intersection. That was one of our, with the exception of the right turn at TS, that was our highest photo red light intersection, is 99 north. It also happens to be our highest speeding intersection.
By far.
So this is where we start talking about safety. You run the red light, you're risking what we call a high angle crash, a heavy mechanical crash, which carries the most risk for injury. You throw speeding in on top of that, now you're talking about real significant problems.
And as you're coming around, that's a semi-blind corner as you're approaching the
Yeah.
light.
So anyway, so you can see the numbers at the various speeds there for 99 at Sunset, and then you have 99 north at 12 at Sherwood, and the totals of all 56 plus, and then the numbers for 99 south at 12 at Sherwood. Now, based on the numbers, there's other approaches that have cameras on them, but the numbers were so low that we're not reporting them, we're not looking at them. But those are the three directions that we're looking at. So again, we have 2 northbound at Sunset and at TS, and then 1 southbound at TS. Yes?
It seems that, just to me, in my opinion, that with this one being sort of the highest speed intersection, that it would also be a pretty good case because the high school going in right there.
Oh,
So the
absolutely.
high school
That's-
going in right
yeah.
there, and then these are the speeds sort
Yeah.
of right in front of the high school.
Yeah, you bet. That point was made at the council meeting as well. Thank you for mentioning that, because I always forget that, but that's a key component. So you can see the total. So in 1 year, we had basically 90,000 people speeding through those 2 intersections, north and south. Does that make sense? Everybody tracking me? Yes.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to put a 4th location south on Sunset, because what people, they're starting to speed up.
Numbers didn't show that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Perception.
Well, here's another question for you. One of the concerns that I've had, and when Chris asked at the beginning, I remembered it after I had passed, but turning left from Sunset to go south on Sunset, on Highway 99 is a major
It's a
issue.
Bearcat, yeah.
And is that going to be rectified
Yes.
before the high school is built, or is it part of the high school expansion?
I believe that intersection is gonna get fixed. It's really kind of part of, but it's my understanding it's gonna be before the high school is done.
They're realigning the
Yeah,
west side
yeah.
where the high school's going.
So that Kruger Elwert whole mess there, that's all being redesigned.
Okay.
A huge traffic circle to improve the queue, the lineup for the intersection. And then I think, what's that?
2 double turn lanes coming
Yeah,
in Newburgh.
and the lighting, the intersection lighting will be improved, and I think that will help, the improvements to the intersection will help that problem. I assume there will be at least 1 lane that'll be dedicated left turn arrow, so you won't have to, it won't be like the running of the bulls trying to turn left.
That would be amazing.
We're waiting to go straight as that one person's waiting.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm late to school. Or
So those are your survey numbers. So let's see if this works.
This is amazing.
You know, it may not be reading the link. I'll see if I can try it with the mouse, but if not, I apologize, but, oh yeah, I think
There
it's
you
clicked
go.
through. Here we go. So, here we go. Just so you know, this is 99 at Sunset. This is northbound. Okay, so up underneath our logo is about where the YMCA is at. So you have your bearing. You can see that the straight through lights are both red. Looks like the left turn arrow is green, maybe. Anyway, but the 2 main magazines are red.
Now that it's green.
So it's hard to say, it's hard to tell, and there's the data, when the original video, when we look at, the officers look at the original video, all the data's across the top, date, time, including speed. When this was sent to me, it was sent to me because somebody ran that light so fast. And I didn't say, when you resave it as a WAV file, that's what you get. So I can't tell you how fast they were going, but I can tell you they were going definitely over 70 miles an hour. And the reason I know that is because I also have a video from 12 Sherwood and Avery where a car went through that red light, that's Twelleton's camera, at 79, and it was not that much off from what this car was doing. So I'm confident that this is a 70 plus mile an hour, right straight through a red light.
Do you have any data as far as time of day for when most of the speeders go through?
No,
Is it mostly at night?
I don't know that
I
data.
asked the same question.
No,
I would say probably not. There's probably going to be some kind of, a combination, because traffic volume is going to affect somebody's ability to speed, but traffic volume is so much lower at night that they may be going faster, but you're just not going to get the counts. So it's probably sometime in that overlap.
Do you have data on how many of those violations, when you do catch them, were driving under the influence?
Well, red lights, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people just do it because it's a bad habit, but is there any kind of research?
It would be possible with a lot of work, because we'd have to look at every one of the red light citations and every Dewey arrest and try to combine date and time. I can tell you that it has happened, Because what will happen is an officer will send out an email. I arrested a DUI last night who ran the red light at 99 TS. I saw them, pulled them over, they were drunk. So when you're reviewing citations, please look for this one, because what needs to happen is that citation in the photo red light system needs to get dismissed because the officer's taking care of it through the arrest. So kind of a nuance that adds even more work to it, but. So we've already talked about staff impacts. So again, a police officer has to touch, quote unquote, every one of these citations. We anticipate with those numbers that I showed you on the survey that we'll have, I think we're pretty confident that you're talking about 100%. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 100% increase. So you're talking about as many citations for speeding potentially as there were for red light. So that's a significant impact. That's going to have a huge impact on our staff. That's going to have a huge impact on court staff. So when we were talking about this and trying to come up to what exactly does that mean, I told Katie and what we told council is, at a minimum, I'm telling you, it's going to be a cop. It's going to take an officer to help us alleviate that impact. On the court side, they're talking about probably going to need to add another day of court to process those citations. So traffic safety comes at a price, and that's the price. But traffic safety, traffic enforcement also has a revenue component. I've never shied away from this. So clearly this has a revenue component, just like photo red light does, every ticket. So that's the good side, is the revenue component will offset the cost, and it will probably be a beneficial, will be on the positive side of the revenue side as a result of this. I mean, that's just reality. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we clearly have a speeding problem.
So I personally have a real problem with our sworn officers spending so much administrative time doing something like this. Is there any possible way where an administrative person could be hired to basically do the review and then hand that over to have an officer be the one to send out the official citation, but the actual background, because it just seems like a real significant, I mean, taking them off of the street.
So there's a solution, but it's not the solution that you just stated. So we're looking at, I gave a, the clear impact in terms of an officer, because that's the way we're doing it now. If we get to this point, we're going to explore trying to find somebody that's maybe recently retired that we can bring in on a part-time basis, and that they'll be certified peace officers, so they can issue citations, and that'll be their sole responsibility. They'll come in part-time, they'll work an hourly wage as an on-call employee, and they'll come in and they'll do that, and that'll alleviate some of the load. There's no way we're going to be able to take it all off the officers, but if we're able to do that can at least kind of lighten the load a little bit. But you just never know if you're going to find somebody that is going to be able to do that or that wants to do that. So we have to make it attractive and have to pay them enough to make it worth their while. But that's something we can explore. The problem with the scenario you gave is that the person that reviews it that makes the determination is the one that needs to issue the citation. Okay, because they're not witnessing the violation, they're witnessing a recording of the violation. And that's the way the statute is set up. So the statute doesn't give us the ability to say, hey, you know what, Rich is going to be a volunteer and come in and review these. We're going to give him the training. He's going to, and then he'll dismiss the ones that need to be dismissed. The ones he leaves, then an officer goes in. The statute doesn't let us do that. So
You also have, if I remember right from the work session, you have a certain period of time from when the photo was taken before you have the process.
Yeah, so there's very clear, hard timelines in statute. So when a citation is issued, the clock starts ticking, and we have so many days to get it issued. It has to be in the mail by so many days, the person only has so many days to respond. I mean, there's very set timelines. I can't tell you off the top of my head what those are, but there's very set timelines. So if a ticket sits to, and we've had this instance where we've gone into the queue, and there'll be 3 citations out of 25 that are in a highlight color, and I can't remember if it's red or yellow. And that means they're within a couple days of just going bye-bye. The system will just kick them out. They could be 100% righteous, RO driving, 100 miles an hour, but if we didn't get to it in time, the system kicks it out because of the statute. They went outside the statute timeline. So that's an issue, is we've got to make sure, that's why we have so many people, we've got to make sure we've always got somebody on duty that can be processing the citations.
So Chief, if we implement this, go ahead, is there any additional cost to us to do this, or is it cost to, was it Red Flex? Is that, would it be absorbed in the fee that we already paid?
No, there would be another, we would negotiate, what we'd probably end up doing is negotiating a brand new clean contract to include those services, and the fees would be negotiated, and so our fee to the vendor would increase from what it is now, because they would be providing enhanced services as well.
And Chief, I know we've talked about this before, but I cannot remember. These cameras don't record all the time, right? So I'm thinking of other crimes that are happening, and can these systems be tapped into to help with those?
Yes and no. So it's going to be hard for me to explain this so it makes sense, but there's so many components to the system. First of all, the statute will not let us use these cameras. The legislature decided in their infinite wisdom that we could not use the footage from these cameras but for anything but enforcing photo red light and now speed. Okay, so I think they may have fixed that and said now if it's a felony you can do it. But originally that wasn't it. So if somebody pulled into an intersection, let's say they pull up on a red light and it was a road rage deal and a guy shot, we said, hey, we got it on camera. The statute actually prevented us from using it as evidence.
That may have been fixed.
I think that was fixed, but
you can't.
But you can't use it for a cell phone, right? So I can't tell you how many of these videos you look at and somebody's on their cell phone as they're running through the red light. Can't give them a cell phone citation. Can't, if they were committing some kind of misdemeanor, they got a bottle of beer their way, you can't use it for that.
But it's also, I think the other part of Amy's question is it isn't continuous. So let's say
That's
you
right.
know that a store got robbed and you have a description of the vehicle and you're checking cameras to see which way it
Yeah,
went.
thank you. I kind of got off track and forgot the second part of that. So they are recording and you can pull footage like that.
Okay.
The way the system works is the system, the brains of the system that says, oh, somebody's going to run the red light is only activated based on the speed when somebody goes over that. Okay, so the way it works is you have the magic line in the sand, which is probably about, you've seen the loops cut in the roadway. They're probably 4 feet or so behind the actual white stop line. This is all mathematical formulas. So the system is sitting there. So picture me as a system, if you will. I'm sitting there and I'm monitoring traffic. Okay, camera's on, but I'm not. I'm awake, but I'm not active. If that makes sense.
Cameras on and recording.
I think so.
Your Google on the phone.
It's
What?
recording.
It's like Google on your phone, it's there.
But you're not
It can
using
hear
it.
you, but it's
Yes.
not.
Okay. So the light, the control box, I'm dialed into the control box, okay, which by the way are all controlled by ODOT. We can't even go near those things, the timings. But I have like a wire plugged in there, so I know. And so now the signal says, okay, I'm switching to yellow, and I say, oh, okay. I'm going to pay a little bit closer attention because they're switching to yellow, and I know red comes. So then meanwhile, now a car's coming and I'm seeing the car, but I'm still not completely paying attention, right? Until the car goes over my sensors. And now I can do the math in my head that tells me that car is going too fast to make the timing. Because I know that the red is gonna hit in 0.23 seconds, and that car is not gonna be over the white line in 0.23 seconds based on their speed. And so now I'm ready. And the car hits this, I take a picture of this. So I mean, that's the easiest way for me to explain it. But because it's kind of in that quasi-ready mode, let's say that we have somebody turning from 12 Sherwood Road onto, well, let's say they're going straight across on the Roy Rogers, okay? There's no camera on that 12 Sherwood leg. So as you're coming 12 Sherwood, the light's red, you blow the red light, heading to Roy Rogers. Meanwhile, another car is coming on their green, and we have a crash. Officers respond. The system wasn't paying attention to that car because it was on a green light. But the system was on, and so we can get a hold of Redflex and say, hey, January 19th, 5:32 p.m., there was a crash, and they can go through that raw data bank and say, yeah, we found it. I don't understand how that works, but it does.
So like similar to the video that you showed us, I mean, clearly we were watching a video of that car and we saw the flash of the camera. So I was guessing that those videos are
12
always.
seconds, yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I guess that's what makes it work, is they're able to grab 12 seconds prior to the violation, and it's because they're always running.
Got it.
I apologize, I am just not into that techie that much, but
No, that's
that's,
fine, that explains it, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? Let's have, since we have a council possible resolution in 2 weeks, right? A little over 2. So, let's have some discussion about what we think. And then we'll see if we want to provide input at that meeting. Any thoughts?
Well, traffic safety is the number one issue. Everybody I talk to complains about that. I think if the general population knew that we turned down, have the possibility of doing this, and we turned it down, we would be severely criticized for not listening and not taking action to try to do something to help the traffic safety issue. So I think it would be, we would be remiss if we didn't say this is the right thing to do, having the ability to go ahead and do it.
I also would say that I think it's, although I'm not a huge fan of it, the whole Big Brother thing, but I understand the need for it, and I think it's a good idea that we're out in front of it prior to the new high school being built and that whole intersection being much more impacted. And so I think it's an advisable thing to do at this point.
The biggest complaint I hear about from my friends and colleagues is traffic in Sherwood, but it's mostly through the neighborhoods and not through those kind of big artery streets. And so while I personally am in favor of having the speeding camera as well, I would still like to go back and talk to my friends and just kind of get their input. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of.
I think there's a lot of concern around town about the location of the new high school. And I agree with Bob and Rich. I think it's a good idea to do it. I think now is the time to do it, especially at that location.
Can I add a point that you probably heard in a work session that we missed in this discussion was that intersection at 99 and Sunset, that can't be patrolled by our officers. There's nowhere for them to sit to catch them on their own, to give them physical tickets. So the red light camera and speed camera is actually the only way to get citations back.
At both intersections,
Oh,
that's
both
the case with both intersections.
Is that because there's not a good spot to do that, or?
It's just not safe.
Yeah.
It's not practical and it's not safe. I mean, we say, a lot of the same issues that I talked about when we were putting photo red lighting. You can't enforce that in these intersections. It's too dangerous, because the only way to do it is to follow somebody through a red light. Sit, watch them, and then now I gotta go through the red light to get them. It's not safe. And then to be able to sit up and sit at radar. So and I'm glad, Counselor, you remembered this, because I forgot it. Remember that this is focused on those two intersections, right? This is why I'm in support of this, because there's those that were around when we started photo red light that asked, well, what about speed vans and all that? And my response was, I'm not a proponent of those. We don't need those. We can enforce speeding in the neighborhoods with the officers we have. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to add speed enforcement to our intersection cameras. Those are the only places we have them. And to me, it's a critical component to slow people down as they're going through the intersections. And we're not otherwise going to be able to do it. It's not going to happen.
And you don't have a sense of the additional cost yet, right, to add that service? So if we were to add the photo speeding, you don't have a sense of how much additional money that would cost for the city to do that?
We do, but I took those out of the presentation because Katie's not here with us, and that's really the finance. But I can tell you this, Councilor Young can correct me, agree, or whatever. I can tell you this, that the anticipated revenue far outweighs any cost that we would have. So that's all, this is gonna end up from a revenue perspective, the way the numbers worked out, is it ends up being, we generate enough revenue to cover the lease payments, the increased staff, everything all the possible impacts.
So with that being said, going back to some other comments, traffic speed is an issue in the city and in the neighborhoods, and some of the major arteries like Sunset and Main Street, Sherwood Boulevard, et cetera, and wherever there's a school, I feel like people are pretty sensitive about speed limits. But I really appreciate, even though it was kind of a shock at first, I really appreciate that flashing stoplight up at the top by Snyder Park. And I was wondering if we have a positive revenue stream, and we're making sure that our officers we're being fully staffed, and we're making sure that all of our costs are being covered, and we have a positive revenue stream, is there a way to begin to start to maybe implement some more of those type of traffic devices? Because there are still some places around town that you just think, man, people just need to be reminded to go slower.
That has been discussed, and I think there's some real potential for augmenting some of our existing signage, and certainly exploring that moving forward. I will tell you, and I didn't prepare this for this presentation. If you want, I can bring it to you next month. We had some stop sign surveys done. And I can tell you that the sad reality is the stop sign at Pinehurst and Sunset that flashes red, people run right through it. Not Pinehurst,
Up by Schneider.
but Snyder Park.
Alder
Sorry. Thank you, Alder Grove. They run right through it. We set up a temporary camera and videoed, as well as other stop sign locations. We looked at several. I've got the videos, and because we were exploring how do we better enforce stop signs. And while you can argue that those are effective and they work, because I don't know what it would be like if it wasn't there, the point I feel needs to be made is they're not a panacea, right? So simply that we put those signs up doesn't mean that the problem's eliminated. Because they're still running through that while it's flashing. I mean, you can see it flashing in the video as the car goes through.
Well, what I appreciate about it is how early it turns on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're just not paying attention, it's impossible to not pay attention. You still may purposely run through it. But I think that's why data is important to find out what was it like before and what is it like now. Do we have the people that blow through it? Is the numbers down? Or is there data that shows that people are coming to a full and complete stop more often now because of the flashing? So I guess we need to collect that data, but I would guess that the answer to that is yes, it has improved, and therefore, if we have positive revenue and we have the ability, I think it'd be interesting to look at other locations.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. You're asking for, quite honestly, a huge project because you're talking about traffic counts. And you can't do that with tubes because you're only gonna count people that run the red light, so, or run the stop sign. I can tell you that photo enforcement works, because you just saw that. I mean, clearly, where we started and where we're at now, there has been behavior modification, which is what we wanted. We have fewer people running our red lights now than we did when the system was put into place in the full year 2011. So 5 years from now, what's it gonna look like? Don't know. Will it still be at 55? Then we say, okay, have we reached our threshold of improvement? Or will it be down another 1,000? I have no idea. But certainly to this point, it's worked. Because traffic volume hasn't gone down.
Well, and that's my point. Besides the high school, we haven't seen the results of the Dundee bypass. And when the 12th and Sherwood goes through, how much traffic that has been turning off at Salem or to head to Salem is now coming through because they didn't want to go through Dundee. My gut is we're going to see a lot more truck and commercial traffic and other stuff, and that's just the reality of life in Sherwood. But being somebody that lives off of Sunset, I have nearly been hit with somebody blowing through that northbound red light and traveling way too fast. And that is, to me, the most dangerous intersection in town. And like we talked at council, it's already posted that you have photo enforcement as you're approaching that. So we're already notifying
And
people.
there's 2 layers of signs too. I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's 2 layers of signs. If you remember, as you're coming northbound, there's a sign that tells you reduce speed ahead. And then you come and there's actually 45-mile-an-hour signs on both sides of the road. So,
I have just one more thing about getting back to the speed. Since I sat in on the work session and knew this was being considered, I took the opportunity to ask neighbors and colleagues in various settings what they thought about it. I didn't have a single person that thought it was a bad idea. They all thought it was a good idea. And as one of my colleagues said, why not, if we have the ability to do this? Give me one good reason why we wouldn't do it. And since it's a major problem there, until you can come up with that, I'm all for it. So that's something that resonated with me, and I think that we should go to council on the 6th and say we, as our endorsement.
Is that the motion?
If you want it to be a motion, I'll
Do
make
we
it.
have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, there we go.
I abstained. I just want to, for the record, I abstained.
And I would add that I checked in with my libertarian wife, and she was concerned that it was Big Brother, but she also doesn't like the speed and feels, well, we got to do something, So I need to check my calendar to see if I can be at that council meeting, and if not, I'll find an alternate.
can I clarify and make a request? I'm a board member. Do you think you'll have time before the 6th?
Yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah.
I would be interested, if you just want to shoot me an email, if you
Yeah.
want to send it to the whole board, whatever, but I would certainly be interested in the feedback that you got.
Yep, I'm happy to do that.
I didn't get into this earlier, I suppose, we don't do a whole lot of actions, and this kinds of things, but, I told council, I think we said in the work session that it's our recommendation that we should move forward. I think it's about safety, and so, you've already voted, so it's safe to say that, but that's your police chief's opinion.
And it was funny, I was asked if we considered it yet.
I had to
I
tell
said,
you guys
it hadn't heard about it yet. Tonight was the first night, so.
I have a question, just a totally aside from this particular issue, but when the 124th intersection is completed, is that in Sherwood city limits or is that in Tualatin city limits?
Sherwood city limits end at Cycle, so that's going to be 12 to 12.
Okay. Because
So-
I see that becoming a major
Yeah,
traffic.
probably will. So as you come to Cycle and turn left, I can be corrected if I need to be. I don't know that if the line's down the middle of the road or it's on the west side of the road, but generally speaking, the west side of the road is the city of Sherwood, the east side of the road is the city of Tualatin. So Cycle is kind of the line there.
Just a quick question over on the speeding stuff. Have you looked at or considered or done mobile photo speed enforcement?
No, that's been brought up before, and like I said, that it's philosophically, I think that's our job, is to do that. When we're talking about school zones or neighborhood streets, we can do that, and I think that's the way it should be I think it's more of a community policing approach. You're generally talking more about residents, and so then they have an opportunity to have an interaction. I believe 99.9% of the time it's going to be a positive interaction with their police officers. That education can take place, and you just don't get that with photo enforcement. I don't think we have the volume. I'm just not a fan of that away from, using the vans in the neighborhood streets or whatever. So we haven't really ever considered it, but it has been asked before. So
Yeah, I haven't seen the radar trailers out in a while.
okay.
Maybe a year
And
and a
I
half.
honestly don't know. I'd have to look. Yeah, I'm sure you may be right.
There was one out in Woodhaven as you're going to the roundabout. I know because I drive it every day to school. But there was one there because I know a lot of parents post on Facebook about high schoolers like flying through there. So I think just having that there was helpful.
You talking about on Dewey?
I think so. Yeah, like the
That little
roundabout.
narrow
Right before the
Yes,
hospital.
yes,
Coming
where
in.
people park on both sides and like one car can fit through. Yeah, that one.
It's also where we've had a pedestrian.
Yes.
One of the locations
yes.
where we had a pedestrian struck. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, people go fast through there.
Which along those lines, I actually do really appreciate the new, for the ones that don't have lights, I appreciate those signs that were
Mhm.
installed in the middle of the street. And at the high school, but also for me, I live off of Sunset. And in front of Archer at night, it was so hard to even see if people were waiting on it, so like the residents who live here, slow down, look, can you see anybody? But it's nice that those signs are there because I actually feel like even when you're driving to them, your lights reflect
Mhm.
off of them and you can see better across the crosswalk.
Yeah. Let's joke off.
I liked it.
Okay, any more discussion? All right, I will check my calendar. Counselor news.
Hello, I'm Catherine Young. I'll be your new liaison for this year. Our alternate is Counselor Griffin, so I'm not able to make it. Counselor Griffin will be one, but I don't miss very many meetings, so I don't plan to miss any. One thing I was gonna say is when I'm having conversations with my neighbors and friends about the speeding ticket thing, is one thing I'm gonna point out is 74% of them are people not sure, but we are giving tickets to people who are speeding through our town who don't live here. So that's important to me. I think people need to slow down through our town. As Chief mentioned, that's gonna come, it's slated to come to council on February 6th as a resolution for us to approve that. Also on the 6th, we are having a work session on body cameras, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. And then also that same evening during our regular council meeting, we have a resolution to approve the contract for the cameras as well as the IGA with Hillsborough. Yesterday, council met with Representative Rich Vial, who's really interesting, gave us an update on what's going down in Salem. He mostly talked about transportation, he's trying to bring back to life the west bypass. It's been talked about, I guess, for a long time. So he was talking to us about that a little bit. On Wednesday, I'm looking forward to what I'm calling a sit-in, or sit-along instead of a ride-along. I'm going to sit with Officer Collins through evidence and kind of see how our evidence is processed, and maybe we'll get out and see how our code enforcement is done as well in town. So kind of interested in seeing how that goes. So today, this is a kudo for you. I met with a citizen, Councilor Roser and I met with a citizen who just wanted to talk about some things, but he had been in our last Citizens University, and he said he was most impressed with our police. He says we have a well-oiled machine, and the staff person, couldn't remember anything that's running it, is doing a great job. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And that's it. We have a full council again, and I think for the rest of the year, we're just going to do work as usual, get the business done, and it's really going well. So, yeah, full motion again.
Good. All right, any questions? All
I'm
right.
happy to hear any suggestions. If you want certain things for me to update on, or just let me know.
Traditionally, it's just been an update of what's going on and anything, like you flagged the body cameras, was good to know. Thanks.
Usually, the liaison brings cupcakes.
Sure, whatever.
Not.
I'll try.
Now that I handle
Jennifer Harris.
ice cream would be appreciated from Andrews.
Oh gosh, next month I'm different.
You totally should.
Chief, staff report.
Okay, a couple things for you. You have a copy that I handed out of the final call for service chart that captures from 2010 through 2017, full year. And I would call your attention in particular to the last 5 years, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Note that 2015 is in a different color. I did that because that's the matrix data. I'm gonna beat this drum one more time with you all, and then only as needed if it comes up. But so they chose to look at 1 year of data, and it just so happened to be the lowest year of data in a 5-year span. That's pretty significant to me when you start talking about getting a real picture of what the police activity and the police workload is all about. So 2017 was, I could probably, if I wanted to work hard enough, go back further than 2010, but clearly 2017 was really kind of off the charts. But it's not an unusual spike, right? I mean, when you look at those 5 years, you're seeing a general trend at a couple of low years, but overall from 2013, things have been getting busier for us. So just some little analysis as I look at 2017 specifically. We average about 480 calls. That's non-emergency or 911. So those are when the public picks up the phone and calls us, or calls dispatch, and needs something. We average about 480 a month in 2017. We average about 1,145 self-initiated activities per month. So that breaks down to 70%, 30%. So that's the call makeup. Now that doesn't equate to proactive time because that doesn't take into account officer availability and all that. I haven't worked those numbers out. But this year we'll have a significant, when we compare 2017 to 2015, and the analysis was done on public demand versus proactive activity. Remember those ratios in the staffing report? This is going to have a significant impact on that. So it's going to change those numbers noticeably when we work through that. So that's important. I mean, it's not going to flip them. It's not going to go from 30/70 one way to 30/70 the other way, but it is gonna have an impact. So that's where the numbers played out. Wanted to share that with you. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
So again, just the whole issue of context, what is this in comparison to like Tualatin or Newburgh, Dundee Police Department?
Quite frankly, it's apples and oranges because they have different numbers, their communities are different sizes. We have to be really careful in comparing jurisdiction to jurisdiction just because of all the variables. I have no problem comparing jurisdiction within jurisdiction, right? And that's what I do. So even when it comes to officer ratios, those take a beating because they say, well, that's no way to determine staffing level. I think they're extremely useful when taken from a historical perspective within a single jurisdiction. So if we look at these numbers compared to where we were, like I've done here, that's useful information, okay? Because 2011 wasn't that long ago, right? I was here, most of y'all were here, and that's what it looked like then, and you add 1,000 to that, right? In a year, that's a pretty significant increase in just calls for service. So then we say, well, what are these? How does that compare? Let's just say hypothetically, how does that compare to 2006? Well, I don't know because I don't have the numbers. But then, in addition with it, but I can tell you it's going to be probably going to be significantly higher. But then we add to that, well, what was the officer ratio in 2011? How many officers did we have per 1,000 in 2011? Don't have that at my fingertips, but how many do we have now, right? Those are valuable comparisons because now you're apples to apples, just at different time periods within a single jurisdiction. I think that's where it becomes valuable.
But at the same time, when we went through that staffing study, one of the questions that was trying to be answered is, are we staffed enough for our city? And this kind of data helps us be able to substantiate whether or not we think we need to have more police officers. And I think having that data available to us, because we are the advocacy in a sense for you, if anything, just data as compared to our actual city growth, so that we can say, hey, our city's growth. But I do think there's probably some validity. And again, I know it takes a lot of extra time, and I'm not advocating that you go out and spend hours and hours. But just in general, I do think people will want to know, well, how do we compare to Tualatin? How do we compare to Newburgh? Newburgh's 3,000 more people, 3,000 more residents than we do. How many police officers do they have? How many calls for service do they make? And I do think that's a valid question.
Yeah, I understand. So what data we do have is what the population looked like at a fixed point in time, how many officers we had at a fixed point in time, what the calls for service were, what the demands were, so on and so forth. So that's data that I can give you. I can get that other data as well. I'm just telling you that there's been times when that has been of interest to people. There's been times when I've been shot down because I'm not making proper analysis. So it really depends on the audience and who wants to know what, and who's sitting in the crowd, or quite frankly, who's on the dais. I mean, just being real, that's what it comes down to. So it's, what does the audience want to know? And if that's what you want to know, I can certainly get that data for you. Let me go a step further on this and tell you that this increase in calls for service is not enough of an increase that would cause me to say we need more officers out on the street on patrol. Okay? I haven't dug deep enough, but I'm pretty confident to say right now we require 2 on all the time. This isn't enough of an increase to say, okay, now suddenly that's going to change. But if this trend continues, we will come to a point in the future where that is exactly what it will suggest. However, what it does suggest is when your calls for service go up, your self-initiated activity goes down. So your ability to do the community policing types of things, the proactive types of things, goes down because there's only so much time in the day. And again, for me, the elephant in the room is the availability component, okay? And I don't know if we've gone through this recently or not, but what the staffing study showed, which is simple math and we can replicate at any point, is that for every police officer we have, every full-time position, when we take off their days off, their vacation, their sick time, and their training and time in court, the time that they're away from patrol, when we factor all that in, we come up with a net availability of 0.7, let's say 0.7, well, for us it was 0.72 in 2015. I don't think that will have changed much. So 1 doesn't equal 1, right? 1 equals 0.72. So we have to have 2 out all the time. So then if we have 2 on the schedule to put 2 out, 2 doesn't equal 2, 2 equals 1.44, whatever the math plays out to be, right? So then we have to go to 3, because then 3 equals 2.1 or whatever, just over 2. So in order to put those 2 out, we have to have 3 that are available on the schedule. Not on days off, not on, to me, that's the part, as I've said before, staffing study never got into. That's the elephant in the room. Because right now, we don't have a schedule that provides 3 on every 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so that we have assurances of putting 2 out. That's what needs to be fixed. So that's where the need within patrol is. The need isn't, oh my goodness, our calls are, the officers can't keep up. No, the officers can keep up. I'm showing you that we're having an increase, but I'm not telling you that the officers can't keep up. The problem is we've got to have 3 on the schedule to put 2 out, and we don't. So then we have overtime, and we pay overtime, and our overtime is not anywhere near what would be considered outside the norm. But the problem is, it may not be affecting us financially, but then it starts to affect us from a staffing and a personnel perspective. Because at a certain point, folks get to a point in their career where I don't want to work overtime. And then all kinds of things start happening then. They stop signing up to volunteer for overtime. They have to be forced in, which now means it's even worse. And so when we start talking about the work-life balance and what do we do for healthy officers, so that's all the patrol component. Outside of patrol, that's where the clear staffing needs come in. Just read a research article the other day out of Canada where they went in and did a multi-year study on the effectiveness of school resource officers. And the findings were not surprising to me, but how strong the findings were surprising. The results were just very, very strong, that the positive effect that school resource officers have on students to report freedom from bullying, to report a higher sense of safety, to be more successful in the educational environment. There were several factors they measured. And I gave the article, I saw the article, I didn't read it, I gave it to Officer Bertrand, our SRO, and I said, hey, read this, tell me what it looks like. And he said, Chief, man, it's an amazing article. So we've talked about that. We need more school resource officers, and we're missing a huge amount of impact by only having 1. And now we have the research that shows that. Talk about investigations. We have 1 detective. That is, we are way understaffed for this community in 1 detective. Again, the staffing study took a snapshot, walked into the detective's office at the time and said, tell me how many cases you had. Happened to catch, at that time, Detective Smith, when she had a fairly low, things were calm, she had a lower caseload, said, oh, based on those cases, you don't need. I said, well, wait a minute, let's talk about how many. No, we don't need any more data. That's sufficient. So they took the same approach they did with the year. 1 year is good enough. Well, if you talk to Detective Asel right now, he's going to tell you he's running around like a madman, keeping up with the cases. So it's just not enough to do that. We talk about supervision. 3 supervisors cannot physically cover a 24-hour period in 3 shifts, 7 days a week. And any academic, non-academic, professional research or study or article or opinion is going to tell you that supervisory coverage is one of the most critical components in this line of work. You have people walking out, driving cars, wearing guns, affecting people's civil liberties. They need to have leadership and supervision. It's risk management, it's risk avoidance, and it's got to happen 24/7. And you can't physically do that. Like, it's impossible with 3
So
people.
how's with the math? Is it 5?
You know, I don't know. I honestly, I haven't gone to that point because at this point, I'm like, I know it's at least 4.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can see
it's at least 1
4
more.
plus.
So anyway, I'm just expounding because I don't want the message to be, oh, the calls are up, you need more people. Chief Neeson says he needs more officers. Well, I've been saying that, but that's not my message in response to these calls, per se. So I just wanted to add a little bit more information to that.
But this is just one piece of the pie of
This is
what
one
you guys
piece of the
provide
pie.
for our city.
Yeah,
And if this is already expanding at that level, and we have these other areas, it just is going to compound if there isn't some adjustments made soon.
What's the significance of 2012, 2013?
I don't know.
You're at a plateau and then all of a sudden it starts jumping.
Yeah. I'd have to go and look. I don't know if there was, if something happened in the system, that things were tracked differently, or I just don't know. On the calls for service side. There's a point in time where our self-initiated activity went like this, and then it stayed there. It's because we started recording our activity differently. And so I can clearly explain that. I can't explain that. I'm gonna have to look deeper into that and just see if it was just, I assume we just had a spike. Could have been, it could have been there was a series of crimes happening in the region and caused people to be more attentive and call more. I just don't know.
Yeah, but after that, I mean, except for those 2 low years, which are really slow, you do show
Yeah.
a continuous increase versus the plateau that was at least the 3 years before.
Yeah, that's all from dispatch, as it says, WACA, I go online, I run and I put in the date parameters and it spits the data out, so unfortunately, I'd have to have somebody there help me, and they just don't have the staffing to do that, but it's curious.
I have another question. I keep asking about comparisons with 12 and Sherwood. But do you know from other chiefs, are they also feeling understaffed to the same degree that we feel it in Sherwood?
I can tell you, Newburgh and Tualatin are. In fact, I've had the Newburgh tell me, if he's told me once, he's told me half a dozen times, Jeff, you don't have enough cops. You guys gotta do something to get more police officers. So,
What about the sheriff's department?
completely different animal because of the
Okay.
nature of their business.
Okay.
I mean, they're rural, they're covering a lot of rural areas, so,
That's more territory than it is.
yes.
Problems.
And it's responding to calls versus interacting and community policing too, right?
Say that again?
It's more just taking calls versus community policing
For the
More-
sheriffs?
for the sheriffs.
Oh, no, they do proactive policing as well.
Oh, they do?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's a big area, they're cut into areas, and they have priority areas. For example, Aloha is a priority area, very dense, so they're not gonna let that fall below a certain amount of coverage. Out here, there's a lot more open country, and there may be times when they don't have somebody readily available, and so they may be covering this area and, bleeding over into another area. I mean, that's the reality. It's a little bit different.
If there's a call like out off, lateral that's out of Sherwood, who responds to that? Washington County or whoever's closest?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the call. It's gonna be, if it's a non-emergency call, it's gonna be Washington or Clackamas County. if it's an emergency call, they're gonna find the closest unit, and it's gonna be us. So, for example, we had that incident Friday, I think it was Friday, right out here.
Yes.
Sherwood officer, because county wasn't immediately available, they said, hey, see if Sherwood can check it out. It was our officer that was first on scene out there, so that's how that happens.
Any other questions? All right, board.
Yeah, the next thing I wanted to confirm is if, and I apologize, my notes may have been off, but I have Rich Miller, Bob Silverford, Diane Foster, Lori Zwingli, Chris West that have indicated that they would like to be reappointed or are willing to be reappointed to this board.
And or expiring, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. Actually, I'll get to that now, I apologize. So yeah, your terms, all the terms end in March. So unfortunately, those that filled vacant terms, those also end in March. I think it was kind of a system hiccup. So we need to fix that, we will fix that, and everybody's term is the same, so we need to fix that as well, but that doesn't need to be addressed right now. But what does need to be addressed is come March, we have terms expiring, and I'm prepared to move forward for reappointments, move forward with the mayor for reappointments so that we can kind of keep going business as usual. But I want to make sure, as I go down the list, obviously I can't hear from Taylor, I have heard from Amy. Cameron, do you know come March what you're gonna wanna do?
So is it, when you're on it, you have to be on it for a whole year, right?
No.
Or,
So your term is, how long have we been around?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years. So your term is 3 years. Certainly the hope is that you fulfill your term, but you can leave at any time.
yeah, I guess my only concern is like I'll be going to college.
Right.
Um,
When will you be going to college?
It is, I believe, like middle to end of September.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So,
I'm thinking now might just be the time to like bow out. And I just
Okay.
have like so much, like school and things that I think now might just be better than like trying to figure it out later.
that's perfectly fine. Mr. Contreras?
Probably not.
Okay. And then I think that's everybody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, except for Taylor. So very good, that's what I need to know. We'll try to assess Taylor. It wouldn't surprise me if she's in a very similar boat as you, which is fine. And as everybody knows, that we value the youth representation, but we recognize that comes with it. So, okay, very good, thank you, that's all I have.
Okay. Doesn't look like we have any citizens to comment. So, anything else from the advisory board that people have thought of that they want to bring up now? Well, Chief, thank you very much. That was very interesting, and my calendar's clear right now, so I will be there on February 6th. So, all right. Are we ready to adjourn? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion for adjournment.
Second. And the question, all in favor?
Bye.
We're done. Thank you.